If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Fitness Mama podcast. Today I am chatting with the amazing Jacqui. So Jacqui has had a new baby boy, Nicholas, and Jacqui joined Fitness Mama a few months ago during mid-pregnancy to really help with her pregnancy pains and to try to keep as fit as possible within this period, as well as to prepare for labour. So Jacqui shares today her incredible birth story. Now, the birth didn't go according to plan, which Jacqui will explain to you. So Jacqui describes her hours of labour, induction, haemorrhaging, and Jacqui shares how quickly things progressed to an emergency caesarean. Now, I do want to let you know that this episode does describe a traumatic birth experience, and if this episode does bring up anything for you, please don't hesitate to speak to your healthcare provider, call Beyond Blue or the Panda helpline, and see the links with resources below. However, although this episode does describe a traumatic experience, it also shows Jacqui's amazing take on her situation. So Jacqui describes how she has come through this experience. She shares how her positive attitude, or you can just see how her positive attitude has really helped to move her forwards. And her bubbly, beautiful personality just shines in this episode. And it was an absolute honour to be able to chat to Jacqui about her experience. So thank you, Jacqui. And for those listening, I really do trust you're Jacqui does share some great insights and some great takeaways from her situation that she had as well. So do stay tuned. But before we dive into this episode, there is a pregnancy workshop available inside Fitness Mama to help you prepare your body and pelvic floor for birth and beyond. So this workshop, it's designed to help you feel more confident and empowered about your upcoming birth experience. In this workshop, you will learn about pelvic floor preparation, so you will learn what perineal massage is and how it may help to reduce your risk of perineal tears and episiotomy. You'll also learn about afterbirth recovery essentials to help boost that all-important afterbirth recovery period. So as a women's health physiotherapist, everything I share in this pregnancy workshop are things that I believe every woman needs to know when pregnant to really help with her birth and afterbirth experience. So to register for this workshop, head to fitnessmama.com/free and the link is in the show notes. Right, let's dive into this episode with Jacqui. Jacqui, thank you so much for joining me on the Fitness Mama podcast. It is so lovely to chat.
Yeah, you too, Kath. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm so excited to talk to you about your birth story. You've got gorgeous little Nicholas with you, and I don't know anything about your birth story, but I hear it's been a crazy ride.
Yes, very much so. So from the get-go, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So for anyone listening, Jacqui is a gorgeous mum inside Fitness Mama. So it's been a pleasure to help you during your pregnancy journey and your recovery. But let's start at the start, Jacqui. How was the process of becoming pregnant for you?
Yeah, so it was actually very, very smooth. I have been very fortunate. I think me and my partner decided in September last year that we would try for a baby, and we actually conceived Nicholas on the first go. So
wow.
Yeah. So my period was late, and I said and it never is. It's 28 days with it's absolutely perfect. And I said to my partner, I was like, okay, we're going to have to get a pregnancy test. He's like, seriously? And I was like, yep, because I think that I'm pregnant. I sort of got a little bit of an inkling a couple of days before because I felt a little bit of that sort of pulling sensation. And I was like, no, this isn't quite like pre-period pains or anything like that. Yeah.
But you seem quite in tune with your body. Is becoming pregnant something that's been on your radar for a little while?
Yeah, it has for about 12 months. So Justin is 9 years older than me. So it's sort of been something for him that he's been thinking about. And I was like, okay, well, I just want to have a good, secure job, but it just never works out like that, I don't think. So I was like, okay, I'm ready. Let's do this. So it's really, really great, actually. And he was like, okay.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so you felt a pulling sensation. You went to get some pregnancy tests.
Yes, and it came back positive, so that was absolutely amazing. And I've got a friend actually, and so she's going through IVF at the moment. And I rang her, and she was just so elated. I was like, I can't believe it. So she was actually the first person I told, because we were sort of speaking about it around, keeping it at that 12-week mark before we tell everybody. But I was like, I just knew for her that it would be so great for her to hear and things. Yeah. So we went from there basically. And then
was she pregnant at the same time?
No, she wasn't, unfortunately.
Okay.
So she's had a bit of a rough journey. So I think with me, it's been something for her that she has, it's been a bit of a journey for both of us, I think. So I feel so sorry for her. And I think the thing is when you get pregnant so quickly, you kind of think back to that, is that going to happen for me when you go through somebody who's going through IVF? It was so great though. Her reaction was amazing. I was like, it was better than my partner's actually. So I was like, oh my goodness.
Oh, gorgeous.
Yeah.
And how was the pregnancy journey? How was that first trimester?
Yes. So when we reached so I was 4 weeks when we tested, and when I was 5 weeks pregnant, I actually started bleeding quite heavily. So thinking, yep, okay, we're having a miscarriage. But I was getting quite sick as well. So I was like, okay, what's going on? And I rang the doctor, and she was like, well, we'll send you for an ultrasound and see. And I was devastated, because I'm like, yep, okay, bleeding. Yeah, we know what this is like. And I said to my partner, I was like, I was very gutted, but okay, right. Well, obviously it's something that we can do. We can obviously get pregnant. Let's try again. And my doctor was like, whoa, just slow down. We'll take you for an ultrasound and see what's going on first. And we went in and expecting, okay, there's not going to be anything there. And the ultrasound technician, she did the outside ultrasound first, and we didn't hear anything. She's like, that's okay. They're really, really small. We might not get a heartbeat. That's perfectly normal at this time. So we did an internal, and it came up, and we had a heartbeat. So I was like, oh my goodness, but still bleeding quite heavily at that stage. So I was like, okay, well, this little fella's hanging in there quite well. And it turned out that I actually had a cyst. So an ovarian cyst, and they thought it was a little bit of implantation bleeding as well, but it was I get quite heavy periods, so it was very, very much like that. So I was thinking, okay, and then it was absolutely amazing.
And how long did the bleeding? Yeah, amazing.
Through my first trimester, actually, so it was quite a while, and I think for every when we went for the 12 weeks, I was a little obviously I was still pregnant. I still felt like I was pregnant. I was still steadily getting quite ill. And so at every ultrasound, I was always a little bit concerned, because I was like, okay, I'm having all these symptoms, but how's it going to go? Is everything going to be okay? They said that it's a cyst, but could it be something worse? How are we going to go? So, it was probably into the second trimester I stopped bleeding, and then I started vomiting.
Okay.
Yes.
So were you feeling quite anxious during the whole time that you were bleeding? How were you feeling within yourself?
Yeah, very, very anxious. So it stopped and started for quite a bit as well. So I'd go through, and you'd have a little bit of that sort of pre-period bleeding where it's really, really light and quite dark. And I was like, oh, okay, great, it stopped. And then we'd sort of teeter out a little bit, and then it would come back and be really, really heavy. I think for me, where I was trying to really calm myself was, okay, there's no clots. If there's clots, then we've got a bit of an issue, but there's none. I still feel sick. I'm still getting, really sore boobs and things like that. So a lot of pregnancy symptoms. Let's just, try and be calm, because I find I'm not a very big stressful person. I can deal with stress quite well. But I think, when you go through that process and it's something that you're waiting for so long as well, you're like, oh my goodness, I hope, hang in there, little fella. So it was great. But,
and did you know it was a little boy from an early?
No. So we actually had it a secret. So we didn't find out the entire way. So we had everybody play the guessing game and things like that. So everybody sort of asks, they're like, did you have an inkling? And I did not. I had no idea. I'm like, I think when they come out, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's a boy. Yeah. But absolutely no idea that it was going to be a boy. I think as well, you've got all the old wives' tale symptoms too. So, you're really sick. It's going to be a girl, quite hairy. It's going to be a girl carrying from the front. It's a boy and things like that. So I was like, well, be interesting to see.
Yeah, amazing. So you had no idea what it was. You were bleeding, and then you started to feel really nauseous.
Yes, very much so. So through my entire second trimester into the third, I was vomiting every day. It was great. I think the one thing that I take away from it that's positive is that it actually, I didn't put on a lot of weight during pregnancy. So I was like, I need to take something from this, because I guess it can be such a negative thing being so sick the whole way through your pregnancy. So I always try and take like good things from it. Like, yeah, beautiful, you're pregnant. You haven't put on any weight. Like, you're still healthy. You can still do things. It's okay.
Yeah. Were you able to get out the house much when you were vomiting, or were you worried about vomiting in public? What was happening with work and everything?
Yes. So I was still going to work, but so at work, I had to tell everybody that I work in with 5 other girls. So I had to tell them that I was pregnant, because I was running to the toilet quite often. And I guess the thing is as well, because we're going through COVID, so I was trying not to use up a lot of leave, but I did actually take quite a bit, which was kind of quite daunting for me, because I thought, if something happens and I need to take a fair bit of leave, we're in a bit of trouble. But yeah, like it was good for me in a way with the pandemic, because we got sent home to work from home. So I just have little naps in my lunch break and things like that. And that was a great part. But yeah, it was a very big struggle. And I think in yourself as well, when you're so sick, trying to find motivation to do things. So I hardly left the house. I think the house was in a little bit of disarray. Yeah. My partner was like, are you okay? Do you need to go out in the sun? Like, how do I help you?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. So your nausea was throughout your second trimester. Tell me, how was your third trimester?
Yes. So in my third trimester, I think probably week 2, I stopped vomiting, which was great. I had it probably once a week. I was still very nauseous the whole way through my pregnancy, but I got to that point where I was like, oh my goodness, this is how, healthy people feel. I can get out and actually do things. So yeah, my third trimester was great, actually. I really enjoyed it. I think from a perspective of being pregnant and being so sick, it was hard to find the joy in it for that second trimester. And then I got to the third and I was like, okay, this is what this is what it is. Like, and you get all that beautiful kicking and things like that. So it becomes so real. But I was quite grateful to stop.
Oh, I'm glad you experienced that. So how did you go about preparing for birth? Like what was going through your mind, in the lead up to birth, and was there anything that was particularly important to you?
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months. Yes, that's 9 months. They also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITB, FITB, BEE20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
Yeah, so I wanted to try and be as natural as possible in my birth. So I listened to a lot of birth stories and other women and their experiences in and around obviously having a baby. And one thing that I came across quite a bit was in induction, just how that can progress and how some women found that they struggled with that. So that was a really big one for me. I was like, okay, I do not want to be induced if I can possibly help it. Yeah, and let's keep it natural. Let's try and not do an epidural if possible. Obviously, depending on how labour goes, I don't think you can ever quite prepare yourself for labour. You think that you're prepared. But yeah, my midwife was absolutely amazing. She was really, really for it. So we did up a really good birth plan and she was like, okay, let's go for it. And she was really great around learning different techniques for breathing and things like that. So to be able to get you through. And one thing where I came across Fit Nest Mama was for releasing my pelvic floor. So she said, this is a really important thing to learn because from when we're 15 or so, we're taught, okay, we need to have nice, tight pelvic floors. But when you are having a baby, you need to learn to release it. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
So was it your midwife that recommended you to Fit Nest Mama?
No, I actually found you through podcasts. Yes. So I was looking for that and perineal massage because that was another thing that she said was really beneficial. And I was like, okay, let's see what we can find. And then I came across it and I was like, oh, this is awesome. I watched a few videos and I was like, yep, let's sign up. Let's do this. And yeah, try and practice. So obviously you can't practice for labour, but try and get that breathing under control and look at ways to keep calm and be as relaxed as you possibly can. So it was really, really good actually.
Yeah, amazing. So for anyone listening, perineal massage has been found to help reduce your risk of 3rd and 4th degree perineal tears and episiotomy. And it's something that can be started from 36 weeks onwards. And it's something that, so Jacqui's talking about learning that inside Fit Nest Mama. So we've got some videos and things to talk you through all that side of jazz. So all that side of things. So that's great to hear that was helpful. So you primarily had support from your midwife and
Yes.
you joined Fit Nest Mama. Were there any other ways that you prepared for birth? And the podcast?
No, I think they were probably it for me. I really wanted to be very well informed. So I found that obviously speaking with other mums was a really good one. And I guess in it, trying to figure out what experiences they had. I find with a lot of women I've spoken to, their experiences haven't been great giving birth. So I was like, okay, let's take a few things from what's not been great about it and try and avoid it if we can. But obviously birth doesn't quite prepare you for that. You think that it's going to go down a certain road and it doesn't. So yeah, it was just trying to be as informed as possible.
Yeah. And in the lead up to, I'd love to hear your story because as I said, I don't know it, but in the lead up, how were you feeling within yourself? Were you feeling quite calm, relaxed, or were you feeling a little bit anxious?
Yeah, I was actually quite calm. By that point I was quite big as well. So we got to 40 weeks and I was like, okay, this baby needs to come out. It's time, buddy. So I was trying to do everything I possibly could to get things rolling. My midwife said to me though, she was like, okay, what I want you to do is just relax. So birth is it's a marathon. So when you're going through labor and things like that, you're going to be up, you're going to be tired, you're not going to be sleeping. So she's like, just relax. It'll come when it comes. So just, we'll still do a couple of things. So we did a bit of the evening primrose oil and things like that and dates. I ate some dates and she's like, she's like, still exercise to the point that you normally would. She's like, but relax. Come inside, sit down, sleep as much as you possibly can, and we'll go from there. So I took that on board. So it was in May. So the Wednesday I went into pre-labor. I started getting contractions at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, oh my goodness, here it comes. I think I did the evening primrose for 2 days. I was like, right, okay, he's ready.
So did you wake up with the contractions?
I did, yes. I wasn't sleeping very well towards probably the last 3 or 4 weeks of my pregnancy, so the end of the pregnancy, because I was quite big. So I was carrying very large in the front. And the baby put on a lot of weight in my last month. So I was like, he did quite well, actually. So I was like, okay, awesome. So I woke up probably a bit before that, but I was in and out of sleep. And at 1 o'clock I got up and I was like, all right, let's see how we go. And I had a yoga ball. And so I was like, okay, let's go pop on that. And I'll just sort of sit around. They were coming once every sort of five minutes and stretching out. They were not consistent. So I was like, okay, and thinking it was going to lead into, into labour. And then by about 12 o'clock, it all stopped and everything just sort of went back to normal. And I was like, okay.
At 12 o'clock the next day at lunchtime?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, so you'd had a whole sleepless night and then it all stopped.
And it did.
Just what you want.
That's exactly right. I was like, all right. So I actually went to bed in the afternoon and I slept for a few hours. I was like, all right, let's try and get some sleep. Things are obviously moving and I didn't want to be like, I was going to be exhausted no matter what, but I was like, I don't want to be over exhausted.
And had you called anyone at this stage?
I did actually. My midwife, so we figured this baby was going to come because it was the only time she was away. And I was like, oh, okay, he's definitely going to come now, Roz. So I rang one of the midwives and she said, okay, she's like, this is what it sounds like. Just relax a little bit, see how you go, and then let me know how it progresses. If there's any bleeding or anything like that, give me a call back. And nothing happened. So at that point, I hadn't had a bloody show or lost my mucus plug or anything. So I thought, okay, just a bit of pre-labor. So getting ready for everything. Let's relax and see how we go. So my partner, he stayed home for the Wednesday. He stayed home Thursday as well, even though nothing happened. And then Friday morning at about 5 o'clock, I started again. And I was like, okay, so same sort of thing. They weren't progressing, so they weren't coming close together. And in intensity, they weren't very intense. So I just sort of popped on my ball and rocked around. And I had that for probably 8 hours. And then, so in that time, I lost my mucus plug and had the bloody show. And I said to Justin, my partner, I was like, okay, it's happening. Something's going on here. And he's like, all right. So he was sort of preparing himself a little bit. And I was like, all right. So I think it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the Friday, everything started to ramp up, started to get contractions. They still weren't amazingly close, like they were still sort of 2 or 3 minutes apart, but they were getting more consistent and a lot harsher, I guess you could say. So, and one thing that really helped me actually was I did a lot of the exercises that you recommended. So how you sit on the wall and you do the spaghetti. So spaghetti in one nose and out the other. Obviously, I wasn't sitting on the wall at this point, but I was like, okay, so just breathe and trying to really relax. And I had what's it called? A playlist set up with everything in it. Yeah, nice. So it was just like hypnobirthing and just nice and calm.
That's lovely. And Jacqui, I do have to explain that for the listener because they'll be thinking, walls, spaghetti.
What are you talking about?
So in the workouts, we've got a section of childbirth preparation workouts, and they're for any stage of pregnancy, but specifically if you're in those last few weeks. And we do a wall squat, and in that, because we can't mimic a pain of contraction or a surge or whatever you want to call it, but we can get ourselves into a position of discomfort to then practice some relaxation strategies. So that's what we do with the wall squat. And then when we're in that wall squat, we practice different types of breathing. So that's what Jacqui's referring to. And in that breathing, I call it spaghetti breathing, where we breathe in. Yeah, it sounds confusing, but that's what Jacqui's referring to. Just had to explain that.
No, that's okay. And it was actually really, really beneficial in that you actually concentrate on your breathing because you get quite overwhelmed, I find, and it's just really nice to have that staple to go back to. Okay, it's going in one nose, it's coming out the other. And another one that I took on board was actually the waves. So, okay, so you're going up a wave and over the wave and you're coming back down. And that's how I thought of it sort of the whole way through, and everything ramped up from there, which is it was great. I was like, okay, it's time. We're coming through. So I ended up off the ball and in my bedroom. And I spent a lot of time just on my feet. So I was just standing up, walking around, pacing, just trying to get things moving. That's where I found I was most comfortable. I ended up actually, unfortunately, bringing our house out of hot water in the shower. So which I come from near Orange. So in winter, it wasn't very pleasant. I said to my partner, I was like, okay, I need to go in the bath. I really need a bath. And he's like, okay. So I ended up in the bath and he was there boiling the hot water and jugs on the stove, popping hot water into the bath for me to keep me warm while I was going through labor. I was like, oh, he was doing so well. I was like, thank you so much, the poor man. Like I think for us, yeah, it's overwhelming and we expect it, but for them to sit there and watch us as well, it's quite daunting. So he was just so great. I knew he would be, but it's great to see how they react, I guess, with it. You're like, okay, you've got this. Like he doesn't panic. He's really, really calm. And I was like, good, because I think we live a little bit out of town as well, and I was making quite a bit of noise. And I thought I'm quite glad for that because the police would probably be here. So he did well with those things.
So how far to the hospital?
So it's about an hour for us.
And what was your game plan there? Or were you planning a home birth?
No. So essentially what we were going to do was until the contractions got to a minute apart, then we're going to head in. Yeah. So the midwife said try and leave it as long as possible. Keep in your own environment. That's where you're most comfortable. So yeah, she said that's the best thing because what she didn't want to happen was for us to drive the hour in there and then labour to stop. So we went through and I got to, I think it was 4:00 on the Saturday morning. And I was like, okay, Justin, I was like, I'm ready. Let's go. Like, I need the gas. Let's get into, and I was bleeding a little bit as well. So they're like, okay, we'll get you to come in and see how everything's progressing. And I was like, yep, great. Worst drive of my life. I think probably of Justin's too. Oh my goodness. I think you think you're uncomfortable out and about, but once you get in the confinement of the car, it's really challenging and for such a long time because like it actually went quite quickly for me, which I thought was great. But once we got to hospital, it was really nice and smooth. So I obviously got straight in and we...
Can I rewind a little bit, Jacqui?
Yeah, of course.
And maybe this is just me being a city girl.
Yep.
But the thought of being in a car for an hour...
Yes.
When your contractions are a minute apart, that already my heart rate's a little bit faster.
Yes.
Talk me through that. Like you just breezed over the fact that it was a bit challenging. Like talk me through it. Like how did you go being stuck in a seatbelt? Talk me through some strategies that you did to help with that
alleviate
hour-long car trip.
Yes. So one thing I found that was really, really good was tilting the seat back. So we had the baby capsule, so I couldn't go back as far as I wanted to, but concentrating on breathing and things. So what I found really challenging were the bumps. So every time you'd hit a bump, it was just so severe and the pain just became really chronic. So it was just trying to get myself back and think about my breathing and things like that. It might not have sounded like I was in control, but I just was maintaining that control, I think, of labour. So yeah, concentrating on breathing. I had really loud my hypnobirthing playlist as well, and it was just listening to those noises and thinking, okay, so yep, this is a contraction. We're going up, stretched back, and I was laying on my side quite a bit as well in the car. And yeah, like I think I knew I had the drive, and we had no other option. I wasn't going to stay in a motel because knowing myself, I knew I'd be quite loud. So I didn't want to upset anybody. But my midwife said, she was like, okay, well, if you're progressing that well and you leave it to that point, if you have the baby in the car, you have the baby in the car. She's like, the baby's out, everything's fine. So she wasn't too worried. She was like, just, try to stay at home for as long as possible. But yeah, I think I lost a little bit in the yelling. So what I tried to concentrate back on was those lower noises. So I actually read that if you have like lower sort of like mooey noises, sounds a bit ridiculous, that you don't use as much energy and you sort of don't flow and lose that, like I like to say control of the contraction. I have no control, but just that flow into the contraction and how you're handling it. Because once you get through that contraction and you're in another one and you succumb to the pain and you lose yourself a little bit, it can be quite daunting, and that's when you get a little bit scared and things tend to hurt a lot more.
Yeah, it's a cycle, isn't it?
It is, and it's so amazing actually when you think about it, like look back. But it was just all in my breathing. That helped me so much throughout the entirety of labour. It was just coming back to that and being within myself. and just trying to concentrate on something other than the pain.
And did you use TENS machine or anything like that?
No, I actually tried to use the combs. So I saw a comb method. So it was grabbing 2 combs, popping them in your hands and squeezing them. But that didn't really work out too well for me. I ended up just dropping them and I was like, okay, this is not working.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes.
Okay, so you made it to hospital, which is amazing.
Yes, we got to hospital.
Relief.
Yes, that's exactly right. I'm like, I think everybody says it's so nice at home, but I was like, no, the hospital. I'm like, this is where I need to be. And so we got through. I had a few contractions on the way up and I was trying to be as, controlled as possible. But I think I screamed the place down, poor everybody in there. So it was nice and quick and they got me up onto the ward and we went through to the birthing suite. And in there they asked, so we had to explain a few things and they asked me if it was okay to examine me. And I was like, yep, okay, let's see how far along we are. I wanted to keep examinations to see how dilated I was to a minimum. I just wanted it to be as uninvasive as possible. So I was like, okay, yep, we'll check me once and then we'll go from there. And I was 7 centimetres dilated, so everything was looking great. The midwife that was in there, so she was just a midwife that was on the ward, she said, she was like, oh, this is great. You'll probably have this baby in a couple of hours. Like everything's going so well. I was like, I love to hear that. Thank you so much. And so we went through and everything was going really well. So yeah, we got to the hospital sort of 5 o'clock. And then I think it was at about 6:30, 7 o'clock, my contractions stopped. And I was just like, okay, let's try and get them started again. So I did a little bit of sitting on the toilet. So sitting on the toilet, your pelvic floor obviously relaxes and then your contractions come through and they're a little bit tougher, I guess you could say. And I was like, okay, we'll do this. Let's try and get everything rolling again. Because once you're in hospital, I think that I felt a lot of pressure in making sure that I was still contracting, and not that the midwives did that to me, like they were all absolutely wonderful, but I just felt they were like, okay, what's going on? Like, let's get this moving. You've been, I think it was about 2 hours with 10 minutes apart in my contractions. And I sat, I was speaking with Justin, and then I talked to the midwife and I was like, okay, what's something that we can do? Should we just leave it? And she talked about inducing me. I was like, no, let's stay away from that. I was like, what else can we do? She's like, well, your water hasn't broken, so we can look at that. And I was like, okay. And at that point, I think I never actually wanted to have my water broken, but once I was in the hospital and everything had slowed down and by that point I was exhausted. I'm like, okay, let's get this baby out. So, okay, let's break my water. So we broke my water and the contractions came through a couple of minutes later and they were one after the other straight away. And I just found that I couldn't keep up with them. So my breathing and everything like that was just out of control. I got a little bit, I got quite scared because I was like, I just can't handle it. I can't take the pain. I was like, there's no break. And yeah, I just lost all of the techniques that I'd been working with for so long over those last few hours. And then I think I went for about 4 hours like that. And I was like, no, okay, get me an epidural. I've had enough. And they were like, oh, look, there's other options. I was like, no, please just get me the epidural. I'm like, I'm done. I've had enough. And so we got me the epidural, and the anaesthetist, he came in and sort of was talking to me and was like, look, you're in quite a lot of pain. I don't think that you're going to be able to sit still long enough for us to give this to you. And I was like, okay, let's do it. I'm like, I don't care. I will sit still for you. I know what comes at the end of this. Please just give it to me. And he's like, okay. So it was probably 20 minutes, half an hour of just trying to sit as still as you possibly can while he worked around getting everything numb and popping it in. And I was like, just get it in there. It's okay. We'll get there. So yeah, he popped the epidural in and then everything was fine. And they were like, okay, can we check how dilated you are again? And I was like, yeah, of course, let's do that. Can't feel anything. Why not? And I hadn't dilated at all. So for that entire time, I just felt so deflated. I was like, I'm quite glad that I ended up pulling the plug, I guess, at the end. But yeah, for them to say you hadn't dilated and went through 6-7 hours of intense pain, I think I was like, okay. But everything after that, everything was smooth. So I actually even got sort of a little half an hour sleep in. And they were like, okay, you're still not contracting like we would like you to. Can we induce you? And I was like, okay. let's look at the induction. So we did that. And then at about 6:30, we checked me again and I had fully dilated, which was great. So it was coming down to the pushing point. And a doctor actually ended up coming in because the midwife was a bit concerned that the baby's heart rate wasn't fluctuating with the contractions anymore. So they're a bit concerned that he was getting tired. And so, a doctor came in for that, and she was just having a look at his position and things, and he was posterior, so that's why my labour was quite intense. So, which is apparently quite common for your first pregnancy, which is fine. And from that point, everything was looking good. And she was like, just push. And what ended up happening was inside my vagina started tearing. So they were like, okay, what's happening? So I ended up starting to bleed, and they were like, okay, let's stitch that up. And the doctor said wherever she'd put her finger to check the stitch, it had split again. So I was splitting inside my vagina, and essentially they said I was hemorrhaging. So they were like, okay, this is not good. Let's have a look at what we can do here. And so I was pretty well out of it by that point. I had no idea. My partner was probably more informed than what I was. And we had a female doctor, and then they brought in a second opinion. So I got another doctor to come in, and they were like, okay, you're bleeding quite profusely. We haven't seen this before, which is quite daunting to hear doctors say that they haven't seen something. And I was like, okay. So we can do one of two things. We can do a forceps birth because you have pushed for an hour. He's just starting to come down, or we can do a caesarean. And I was like, okay, spoke with the midwife, what do you think? Because obviously they can't say I would do this. It's all about sort of, okay, what would be more preferable for us? What's going to be safest? Is it going to be safest just to go through and do the caesarean? It was end game. I didn't really want the caesarean, but obviously if it means that we're both going to be happy and healthy at the end of it, let's just do it. And we had the male doctor, and he's like, let's do a high forceps delivery. And I was like, okay, yep, sure. Not realizing at that point that just touching inside the vagina was tearing me. So we were going through, and we had it filled out forms and things like that. Yep, let's go through. Let's try and get this baby out. And halfway down the hall, the female doctor stopped us, and she was like, okay, look, this is happening. You are tearing quite badly. We're really concerned. I don't think a high forceps delivery would be good. She said, quite frankly, I think it would kill you both. I was like, okay, right. Let's not do that then. I was like, let's stay away from that. I was like, yeah, okay, let's just do the caesarean. I want him out. I just want to be nice and safe. That it is what it is. Let's go. And so, we continued on. And by that point, the other doctor, he disappeared, and he ended up coming back. And we were like, okay, we're going to go with the caesarean. And he said, no, we're going with the forceps. And I was like, what? And I was a little bit out of it because I was like, excuse me. And he's like, no, we're going with the forceps. And I was like, I sort of looked, because I was just absolutely, I knew that they couldn't say no, but I was just so taken aback. I was like, okay, look, we want to do the caesarean. And we ended up going down, and he's like, no, we're doing the forceps. And my partner stepped in, and he's like, no, we're doing the caesarean. It was very daunting. I was like, my mum's a nurse, so you can imagine she prepped me pretty well on what my rights are as a patient. And I was like, oh my goodness. So we ended up getting into surgery, and he's like, okay, we're doing the caesarean. And I was like, I know, that's what we wanted. So we went through and we did that. I hemorrhaged twice in the caesarean, which was pretty bad. So they got the baby out, and it was, I was so overwhelmed, and I was just waiting because I could hear him crying, and they sort of brought the blanket down really quickly and then held him up and then brought it back up, and I had enough time to look to see that it was a boy. I was like, oh my goodness, I've waited so long to see this baby. Like, it was so amazing. And then, they take them away quite quickly. So I was sort of just laying there like, okay. I actually got a little bit upset because I was like, okay, bring him over to me. I need to see him. Like, they obviously have things that they need to do to check that he's okay. And they ended up bringing him over to me, but I'd lost so much blood that I was falling asleep. So I couldn't actually look at him, which was really upsetting for me. I was like, okay, I was trying to keep my eyes open, and I'm like, he's beautiful, I think. So all of that happened, and it just sort of went a bit pear-shaped. And after they blocked everything, stopped me from bleeding, obviously stitched me back up, but what had happened was in that point I'd torn in my vagina. So I hadn't had a natural birth, but I ended up with 3rd-degree tears. So essentially I'd had both. I was like, oh no. So they were working on that. They took my partner and the baby out, and we're thinking, okay, so we're all coming out. And I didn't leave. They were still working on me, but they didn't tell us anything. And so Justin was outside with the baby, and it was about an hour before I came out, and he was quite upset because sort of nobody was saying anything to him. He was really, really worried, the poor man. And he was just like, okay, what's going on? I need somebody to tell me, is Jacqui alive? What's happening? I think he was a bit concerned that something really, really bad had happened. And they're like, no, they'll just, essentially reconstructing my vagina because it had taken such a hit. And he was like, okay. So for him, I just can't, because by that point I could hear what was going on, but I couldn't see anything. And he was just so overwhelmed, but he held it together so well. And they ended up bringing me out. But during it, I could hear the doctors arguing, and they were trying to get a 3rd opinion to come in at that point to check that they reconstructed me right, I guess you could say. So when we got out, I think I went to surgery at 7:30. I didn't get out until 12 o'clock. So we were there for a long time. And I was absolutely amazed because when I got out and I was able to hold the baby, he latched straight onto a breast and we were able to breastfeed. So that was one thing that I was really concerned about because I hadn't seen him in so long. And I was like, oh my goodness, there you are. Like I haven't seen you. So it was so great to actually see the baby that you wait 9 months to see. And it was absolutely crazy time. And I think after that for recovery is just, it's amazing. So we ended up with the caesarean. We got back to our room quite late because I'd had very high blood pressure, which they were worried about because I'd lost so much blood. They were like, okay, why does this girl have such high blood pressure? It should be low. So we had to stay in the after surgery, I can't remember what it's called, section for quite a while. And we got to breastfeed and went up to the room and we were just absolutely exhausted. Like, okay, that's all over. We're all alive. Wow. We're okay. Yes. So it wasn't quite as I'd planned. But I think that's birth.
Wow, that wasn't what I was expecting with that ending. And you say it with a smile on your face and a lovely laugh.
Like, I think you have to at the end, like when you're going through it, you're like, oh my goodness. And then you sort of look back and you're like, okay, it's fine. We're good.
Wow.
We survived.
Did they end up getting the 3rd opinion?
No, they didn't. No. So at that point, all the doctors, the gentleman doctor we had was a locum. So all of the other doctors were actually away that weekend, so they couldn't get anybody to come in. So no, they just sort of went with it. And I had to go see a gynecologist about a week later after I got out of hospital just to see, because they were like, okay, well, with what's happened, we think that you probably need a reconstruction. I was like, okay, great. Thank you so much. And we got in and everything ended up being fine. He was quite happy. He was like, no, look, that's fine. If anything goes wrong later, in terms of, because my main worry was obviously sex. I was like, okay, what's happened down there? Am I going to be able to have a baby? Am I going to be able to have sex? And they were like, look, we're not too sure at this point. We'll wait until you heal and send you off to see a specialist. But when I saw the specialist, he's like, look, I'm quite happy unless, things are very painful. We will just, we'll go from there. But try, see how you go, and then come and see me if you're having any struggles. And I was like, great. I think the one thing out of all of it that upsets me the most is that I can't have a natural birth. So they were like, look, we don't ever recommend that you have a natural birth. And especially when you prepare so much, and that's all that I was expecting, I guess. Yeah. So, it was very, very wild. And for them to be like, we've never seen this before is another thing. Like, okay, great. What was that?
Yeah. And how old is Nicholas now?
So he'll be 9 weeks old on Saturday, so tomorrow. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And are there any pelvic floor physios where you live?
So there are, yes. Yes.
Good. Have you had an appointment?
No, I haven't. I've actually been pretty lucky with my pelvic floors. I thought that obviously they'd be terrible, but I've been quite lucky. I think the only time that Like, so even, walking around, jumping, things like that's been quite good. The only time I find that I have a little bit of an issue is when I've been drinking quite a bit of water and I can't get to the toilet. And before pregnancy, being able to hold going to the toilet was obviously a breeze. And then after pregnancy, it's okay, I need to go. I've got to go now.
This is the physio and me talking. I still recommend you go and have an appointment, even if you're feeling everything's great, just with what's happened. In Fitness Mama, we can definitely help with the strength side of things and the recovery, but to get that individualized assessment will be really helpful for future as well.
Yeah, which is perfectly fine. My midwife said the same thing, Cass. She was like, go get an assessment done. I was like, I will. I promise. I'll get it done.
Luckily, I know how to follow up and ask.
Yes. I guess that's the thing with the midwife. They drop off after the month, so you think you're safe.
Yeah. And you know what? That's half of what I feel, and we haven't even asked about your recovery, your general recovery yet, but I feel that after having a baby, your postnatal rehab and recovery, it's like it drops off, right? We're busy and you've suddenly got a little gorgeous baby to look after. And that's why, or one reason why I do believe Fitness Mama helps is because it almost holds you accountable. And so, when I know those sorts of things, I can check in and say, hey, Jacqui, how's that assessment
What are you
going?
doing?
What are you doing? Have you come to a class recently? So, tell us about once you were back on the ward.
Yep.
So breastfeeding has been pretty good.
Yes, it's been an absolute breeze. I've been very, very lucky. So I've had no soreness or anything like that. Yeah, he latched perfectly and we've been able to get a good latch. So they say the special K symbol. So he's always been absolutely perfect. After everything, he was, so the next day he was obviously quite drowsy. We'd had a lot of drugs pumped through us the night before. I was on oxygen as well and they were giving me blood thinners and things like that too. And they were a bit worried about clotting, which is something they do after cesareans anyway. Yeah. So he was quite drowsy, but he'd just wake up every couple of hours and feed and go back to sleep. And I was like, well, that's fine. Quite happy with that. The midwives were like, okay, because we do feeding on demand. And they were like, well, he hasn't woken up in 3 hours. We'll wake him up and give him a feed and see how he goes. And he was quite happy to do so. And he's been a very good feeder.
and have there been any surprises apart from, I guess, the whole of motherhood, but are there any specific surprises or things you weren't expecting now that Nicholas is with us?
No, look, I think it hasn't been easy, but he's a very relaxed baby. So at the moment we're going through that transition of he can hear really well, he can see really well, so he's very stimulated. So during the day he can be a little bit, I won't say terrible, but he doesn't like to sleep. He's like, no, Mum, I want to be awake. I think that'd probably be something that put me back a little bit because you expect that you're not going to sleep. It's just how it is with a baby. But when I think that they put you through a bit of a ringer because for the first couple of weeks, they're getting that supplement from your breast milk that helps them sleep. And then all of a sudden when that wanes out, they're like, no, the world is a beautiful place. Let's stay awake. Yeah. But no, other than that, it's been quite cruisy. I think I was pretty well informed as well. And I've had really good support. I think that's the best thing that you could possibly have post-pregnancy is the support. I was able to get into group practice for my midwife, which was really, really good. So their backup support is great. And then, just family and things like that. So I've been, and he sleeps.
Yeah.
I don't like to say that to too many mums. I'm like, say that it's easy ever. I will kill you.
You know what? Everyone has their own challenges and everyone has things that they find easier, everyone has things that they find more challenging. So to finish off with, Jacqui, for any pregnant women listening or new mums, now that you're a seasoned mother of a 9-week-old baby, what would be any words of wisdom or any advice for pregnant women listening?
I think just knowing for me, it would be going back and just knowing exactly what your rights are and exactly what plan what road you want to go down. So if you don't want to have a birth that's interfered, don't don't do it. Just don't. If you get to that point where you want it anyway, try not to, because at the end of it, when you get to that point where you can look back on it, I think you have a sense of disappointment, because you're like, oh, okay, well, I wasn't able to do that. And it's just, like, if you don't want to be interfered with, don't let them. So if you don't want to be checked how dilated you are, don't let them. Obviously, they're the medical professionals. They know what they're doing. But, like, having a lot of research under your wing is the best thing. I thought I was really well informed until I got in there. I thought that, I was in control of the whole situation and I was going to be able to boss everybody around. I'm like, no, I don't want that. But once I got in there, and you get a little bit scared as well, and you're like, okay, well, I'll ask. And sometimes I find that they can do what's easiest for them and not what's, beneficial for you, what you think is going to be right. So I think looking back on that, it's, being that little bit more educated and knowing exactly what can and can't happen.
Yeah. And in addition to that, trusting your healthcare provider, because if the time comes where, as you said, you are a bit scared, you really want to have someone trusted in your corner who you can help to make those decisions. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And I think for me, the hard part was that my midwife was away. So she's an older midwife, and I absolutely love it because she just cuts straight to the point. She's so educated. She knows so much. And then you end up with a couple of strangers and you're like, okay, well, they see this every day. But I think that she would have taken a bit more control of the situation for me. But other than that, it's just making sure you're in a little bit more control. Do you think that you are? And it's kind of backfires a bit.
Well, thank you so much, Jacqui. An amazing story. And I'm honoured that you were able to share it today. So thank you. I know sometimes it's not easy talking about these things, and really do appreciate your honesty on everything and just how open you've been about everything. So thank you very much.
Beautiful, Kath. Thank you so much. It's been great.
We'll chat to you soon. Thanks, Jacqui. And before I sign off, remember my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links at fitnessmama.com/podcast. And don't forget the links that I talked about, including the resources for any birth trauma that you might have experienced, and also the pregnancy workshop that is available on fitnessmama.com/free. That's it, ladies. Have a fantastic day, and I look forward to you joining me next week for another episode of the Fitness Mama podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer: materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'll see you soon.